Hello, you're listening to the Culture We Speak podcast with your host, Deanna Latimer Hearn. For this episode, I sat down with Dr. Karen Davis of Middle Tennessee State University to discuss microaggressions and our experience at the 2022 convention of the National Black Association for Speech, Language, and Hearing, or NBASLA for short.
From the flavorful foods we eat to the rhythm of the beats we keep, our hair and clothes define what it means to be chic. For centuries, onlookers have been captivated by our mystique and every aspect of our being that makes us unique. This is the culture we speak.
Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Karen Davis, who is an associate professor at Middle Tennessee State University. She has worked for over 15 years as a school speech language pathologist. Her research interests are centered in the domain of language and literacy for struggling learners. Dr. Davis's research interests include language and literacy disorder in culturally and linguistically diverse populations, reading comprehension intervention, interprofessional education and practice, and cultural responsiveness in CSD, or communication sciences and disorders education. Welcome to the Culture We Speak.
Thank you. Thank you. So happy to be here. And thank you for having me.
Yes. So I'm just going to put it out there. This is 2.0 because we had some sound issues, family. So we are doing this again because it was worth it, I guess.
Yes. We had too much fun the last time.
That's what I know, right?
Like, we just had to do it again.
Apparently. So Dr. Davis and I, we met when we did a presentation together with Dr. Yolanda Holt. Kind of unofficially online met.
Right, yes.
At that point in time. And then we officially met at the NBASLA convention in Houston.
Yes.
Which was a blast. And I learned that you are about as wild as I am. So
fun times. We had too
enjoyable.
Much fun.
Exactly. But at NBASLA, you were presenting on microaggressions.
Yes.
And so I wanted to have you on as a guest in order to talk about that a little bit so that we can raise awareness about what microaggressions are, how they operate, etc. So I'm going to just start you off there. What are microaggressions and why do they occur?
All right. Yes. Well, again, I think that the past events have been going on just, in light of COVID, and then just the injustice that we saw. I think our profession has really been talking a lot about our experiences in the field in higher ed, and microaggression has been the hot topic, and is actually a term that was coined in 1978 by Dr. Chester Pierce in the context of racial aggression. And so he described it as like subtle, often automatic, verbal, nonverbal put downs that after a while you keep experiencing this and you hear it over and over again. It begins to weigh on your psyche. It really does begin to impact you physically as well. And so at that time, again, focus mainly on racial aggression. But I think in light of where we are today, that definition has expanded to other isms and phobias. So we're talking about insults, whether it's overt, a little bit more covert as it relates to ableism, classism, genderism. You're thinking about transphobia, homophobia, religion. So we are dealing with a lot more now. And so definitely individuals that may fit in that group absolutely can experience these insults. Dr. Daryl Sue is another scholar that has been more at the forefront in studying microaggressions. And he actually talks a lot about how microaggression affects individuals and how it impacts us systemically. And so now he's even working on research or talking more so about micro interventions. What can we do about this? And so it is something that many students have reported experiencing. I know I have, and definitely faculty of color have experienced that, but even in the workplace. I've even talked with clinicians, with supervisors, and even just with their clients, they're experiencing microaggressions.
If we look at what is going on in our profession in terms of the demographics and how we are primarily white and primarily female, that also plays out in the programs that we're in. We have these sort of microaggressions that are built into some of our programs and some of the expectations we have on what a therapist looks like, who a therapist can be. So as you said, it comes from clients, it can come from peers and colleagues, et cetera. I know that they're broken down into 3 different categories within microaggressions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So typically for if listeners that are on here, if they've attended any conferences, they probably have heard these three. So we often talk about micro insults, micro invalidations, and micro assaults. And so with micro insults, which is kind of the more common one, I think this is the one that many of us is kind of like, did that just happen? What was that? And we have the process, but it is more so like verbal, nonverbal, interpersonal exchanges that convey stereotypes oftentimes. So it might be where somebody jokes you about your accent, or it's, you don't sound like you're from this place, or you're very smart for a girl, or things like that. So I'm surprised that you would be comfortable doing this based on your religion. And it might be, again, something that's jokingly or just something that's stated passively and they move on. I've even experienced this when a colleague of mine, we were looking at sessions for CAPS, we were planning to go to CAPS, but things happened, we weren't able to go. But as we were going through the sessions, there were a lot of sessions dealing with DEI. And so it was, okay, see, it's all this stuff. And then after a while, that language changed to, okay, well, here's a good one. Here's a good session. And all the good sessions were sessions that were not DEI. And so at that moment, I'm just kind of like, well, I think this is a great session. And, I could talk a little bit later about, again, even me experiencing that, how I should have responded or what I chose to do at that time. But those are the things that we have to address. But those are those micro insults that occur. And bless her heart, at that moment, she truly did not realize what she was saying. And so it's my job to bring it to her attention. But with micro invalidations, it's more so when you are, again, invalidating somebody's experience. This is the whole, I don't see color, the color blindness, or, we're all women together. So it's not that, but it's more so this, or they try to really water down what your experience is. And so those are those moments where you may share, this really rubbed me the wrong way. And it's like, oh no, you're being too sensitive. No, that didn't really happen. And, but we as women, we all experience X, Y, and Z. Is like, no, it's not.
And that can be very damaging because you start to question yourself in the process of dealing with these sort of acts or experiences. And it's like, well, wait, am I being too sensitive or am I overreacting?
Yes. And that's really that when we talk about microaggressions, because that was the other thing too, when I was at ASHA. And I think that there was a scholar that I was presenting with, or no, my colleague was presenting with this particular scholar. And he indicated like he hated the term microaggression because it's not micro, it's horrible. But to the point you just indicated, the whole process of, I've got to think about first, okay, am I being sensitive? Did I hear that? What did this person mean? How shall I respond? It really becomes this process that can be quite exhausting. So it's not something that we immediately react all the time, because I have to kind of think first, like, wait a minute, what is happening here? And you're thinking about who you're dealing with. What are the consequences of my response or what I say or do? It really is a process that after a while just eats away. That's what makes it kind of micro, because it's just not always clear cut. And you're kind of thinking like, am I losing my mind here?
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of times the question, because you're replaying it in your head. Did that just happen that way? Right. But yeah, it did. And by that time, there's no response. The latency of your response now prevents you from being able to really engage in some cases, which then adds to this sense of, I just, felt this harm. I just experienced harm. I just, was put down in some way, but I now can't really engage in this response that I would like to give.
Right.
The moment has passed, but doggone it, this just happened, And that when that keeps happening, and that is your experience, navigating many different spaces, it just compounds. Like you just keep experiencing the same thing.
The third one is micro assaults. And this is pretty overt. It is more so where the microaggressor absolutely is trying to attack a group or that individual's identity, and is more deliberate. It really is. But I think what Sue talks about, how it may be defined as kind of a micro, is that it's kind of more of a subtle thing. Well, a coward move. So an example would be like if you and I have at a restaurant and we come out to our car and then there's a swastika painted on it. That person has done it, ran off, but they wanted to make sure to let us know we don't like you or we wanted to intimidate you. But even there's been instances, and I think about an experience I did have in grad school where, again, a classmate of mine that I got along with, and we pretty much are cool, but we were having a discussion about the whole issue of Black History Month. And I wrote about this in an article for Mbazla's journal about my experience with microaggression. And I talked about how we were in class and the topic came up. It was February. And so she was like, well, I don't see the purpose of Black History Month. We don't need it anymore. It's just no need for this. And Bill Cosby said we didn't need Black History Month. So it's so. And this is before our recent events.
Yeah.
so he was still kind of America's dad and, in good standing a little bit. He kind of had his little rants here and there. But at that point, I was like, well, we're not monolithic. But for you to think that because this is a Black individual that you like and enjoy and decide that, well, this has to be the person that speaks for an entire race is insane. But it's just like, okay, but you're okay with women's history. You talked about how you wanted to share about your mother and grandmother and great grandmother, what they did in the wars, but there's no need for Black history. And even her tone. So it's kind of like you had a point to make by stating that to me. And then to go on and indicate. So that wasn't no invalidation. There was no insult. That was more so you had a purpose. There was an intent with this assault. And then you try to follow up with, well, let me tell you why, Karen, because this Black man.
Yeah, don't toss the token at us when that happens so much. And especially in a lot of political discussions that I see all over the place. They will tokenize someone and say, oh, well, this person said it and they're Black. So therefore,
therefore
I don't know them and I don't know what they're talking about. And I have
Never
opinions about them. Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
so that's frustrating because it erases your identity. And as you said, we're not monolithic. We have so many different ways of being within our group. And then it's like, you want to erase it entirely and say, well, this person over here who I've chosen as your representative has spoken,
exactly.
like,
so it is so, and
right.
I think about our conversations recently in other topics or other areas, like we were talking about autism or there's disabilities and trying to act like, oh well, it's all love, it's all the same. Like they don't have these needs. They do not want to be erased. They want you to see, who they are. But absolutely with some of these assaults, though, again, they shouldn't be allowed here. These individuals should be placed in a self-contained space at all times. Just, those type of statements that are made and people advocated for that are some of those examples for the micro assault there.
Yeah. Now I'm going to mess with you for a minute because I know you presented on this at Mbazla.
Yes.
So in the morning, I think, because I missed your presentation.
Yes.
I think I flew in same day. And then by the afternoon, evening, you experienced a microaggression in front of me. And so I was like, so at breakfast, you were dropping knowledge on microaggressions. And then by dinner, I mean, you were being subjected to a microaggression. I mean, I know we laugh and it's funny now, but at the time, it's not funny when stuff like this happens.
Right.
So we were at dinner.
Yes.
And we were watching a portion of the show where people were being honored. And at the table we were seated at, someone told you to hush down because they were being honored. Yes. And so which of the three, I know, right? We had some text messaging at that point in time that we were kind of like, wait, did that just happen this way? But which of the three would that qualify as, being shushed in that manner or told to, like, this is my moment, pay attention to me type of thing?
Right. Because given, I think in the context of she was so proud of herself because of the work that she has been doing, championing students and diversity.
And should be honored.
Yeah. She's been honored.
And then she should be.
So I think I might throw that in the insult / assault, because I was like, oh my gosh, she actually shushed me.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what? Like, I was just shocked that this went down.
Yeah, and we were totally taken aback, like, okay. Yeah. And it's like, because you're right, it was like, you must hear my name, and I'm being honored, because it was, again, her attitude of, you see what I'm doing for you all? You see? Yeah. I'm being honored.
So self-centering.
Here. Yes, it was very self-centering. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes. So I think I could probably put that. I think I would do insult / assault a little bit, because literally you shushed me.
Yeah.
And I was cheering everyone on.
everyone. Like, I think we were in a pretty, warm and accepting environment,
Yes.
and no one was detracting from anyone's moment.
At all.
But I think that it just came off very harsh in that moment,
Yes.
like very inappropriate. And so I was kind of thinking about this and like, dang, she presented on this, and then she turned around and like,
And experienced it. Absolutely. And
just
that's
wild.
it really is. And I think, and I love that example because that's something I talk with many of my colleagues about, and I'm very honest about my experiences and how I am constantly working on, I have to do better about really responding and really challenging on the spot. But I think at that moment, it was sort of like, wait a minute, what just happened?
I mean, because I should have interrupted as well, but I was like, did that just...
And we're at this nice banquet and you're thinking like,
yeah,
do I go there now at this point? Or, will she break down? And, I can't really be concerned about that. But at the same time, you're thinking about all these things, but it was at that moment like, what just happened here? Wow.
Yeah.
It's just me.
Yeah, exactly. And like moments later, you were assigned a family member at the table too, which was fascinating as well.
Lovely young lady. Looks nothing like me, but it was the assumption made. The assumption made that she was my daughter. Yes.
Yeah. So it's things like that I think people don't recognize are so commonplace that they're just happening at all times around us. And then it's like the response that you give when you do finally respond in time, when you give that micro challenge and you say, hey, not here and not today, then it becomes, well, that's an overreaction or that's too sensitive or that's, so then you get the invalidation that comes with it because you have had compounding experiences of all this microaggression and suddenly now, you respond.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, that's too much. Well, no, it's not. It's really not because we're going through this all day, every day.
Every day. And I think what our next step needs to be, because as we were presenting, we were defining and talking about microaggressions, but I think what made our presentation unique was, and I say our because Dr. Kimberly Harrell was my co-presenter, but because she talked more about the mentoring piece, but I did most of the microaggression intervention. And so we were talking about the what to do. That's where sessions and programming needs to focus, because now it's where students are saying, yes, I actually have experienced this. I've said something and there has been this backlash. I am feeling attacked. My grades have suffered. I noticed a change in my relationship with my professor or my supervisor, and now I don't know what to do. And so we need to start having these real conversations with supervisors, faculty, directors, like, okay, real talk, you're doing this and you need to fix it. And this is how we're going to do this. And you need to own it and stop trying to say, oh, I want to be here. I want to understand. I know what microaggressions are. I'm going to do my best. But no, let's really have a serious talk about what you're doing. How would you handle this? How will you respond if a student or a colleague says this to you? And I don't think we have really moved into those type of sessions just yet.
The power dynamic makes it very challenging. So even in my doctoral program, I had an experience where someone decided to use some slurs as an example and, included a couple different types of slurs, because I guess we're going to be inclusive in this offensive activity, right?
Right.
And so even though I'm established in my career, et cetera, even at this point prior to having my doctorate, I'm still in the position of there's a power differential here. I need to finish this program. I need to get my degree without all the extra stuff that we're already doing anyhow.
Right.
And so it becomes challenging to then speak up and to challenge that situation. Though I know that's the right thing to do, though I know this is the work I'm preparing to do because I'm into, I push for equity. I'm always, trying to push for anti-racism, et cetera, inclusion for different groups. But, even in that moment of this person spouting a couple of different slurs, which, under no situation would that be appropriate anywhere, but in an educational context, even less, it's still challenging. And so I can imagine that for individuals who haven't gotten their degree, who haven't necessarily gotten their license completed, they don't have their certification.
I'm an academic trying to get promoted,
Right.
So it's like, okay, do I let this slide?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's hard too, because the more that we're dealing with that's the more we're challenged. So you get into the sort of stereotype threats where if I answer in certain contexts also, am I going to be the angry Black woman or whatever other stereotype is out there? So there's so many like nuances to this and so many things that kind of play into how we manage and how we navigate this. So I'm with you. I think educating students and faculty on this would be huge, because somewhere we have to level the playing field a little bit for students who are forced into these spaces.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. As we talk about dominant or the majority population being the allies, I mean, really recognizing it, because I did share how my program chair, she'd even said to me, like, it was something we were talking about, and she had kind of alluded like, oh, we were, so I think we're talking about like, personal trainers, or, like, I got to get fit. And she's like, oh, I have this personal trainer. He's Black, and, you'll love him. And at the moment I was like, okay. And doesn't really matter to me. Just, can you help me get his weight off? And the next day, though, she recognized, she said, Karen, I realized when I got home, I realized, like, why did I share with her that my personal trainer was Black? It doesn't matter. And so she was very apologetic. She said, Karen, you need to be sure to call me out on this. So it was just like wonderful to see someone say, you know what? I reflected. I realized that what I said was not okay. Don't let me slide with that. She said, I know your personality. Yeah. You don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I want to do better. I need someone to bring it to my attention so I can fix this. And so having someone that desires to do that, and even when we're in meetings, she's speaking up like, no, okay, now Karen shared this, but don't go to her like she has to be the, the gatekeeper of all things dealing with people of color, because that's not her job. And she's been that person very protective, because sure enough, my other colleagues don't get that. It hasn't registered. And so I think really having more conversations, or at least trying to create more allies like that. But it goes back to your point of when you think about, again, your environment and those that are willing. And, that's the thing with these conferences, those that want to know will come for the most part. Those that need it, half the time they're not the ones. They're not where they need it.
They're not the ones, honestly. They're the ones at dinner. They're not the ones at the breakfast meeting.
Exactly. Right. So I need my leaders to get these people that I met at dinner, really.
Yeah, right. I'm with you. That willingness is huge. Yes. That cultural humility, that understanding that, hey, I made a mistake. I'm human and I can come back from this. I can learn from this, rather than feeling attacked. Because I think a lot of the response I get, because I'm pretty blunt. So I come back kind of quick sometimes with people. And then they're like, oh, I get more so offense. Like people are offended by the fact that I called it out, instead of, receptive to this idea. And some of that is in delivery, and some of that delivery is very much designed by Deanna, and brought to you, in limited edition.
It has to be that way. I mean, when I talk about, and when we talk about these microaggressions, I can't sit here and say that I hadn't done that or invalidated somebody's experience. Absolutely. And they're like, Dr. Davidson, you said this. That kind of hurt my feeling, or like, I feel like you kind of downplayed what I was trying to share. And I was like, oh God, let me think on this. You know what? Thanks for bringing that to my attention. If it's absolutely valid, but I was open to listen before I decided to react. But you're right. It's the issue of them receiving it and how they're going to receive that and respond to it. Yes.
Part of that is who they're receiving it from. Part of that issue is, I'm not interested in what the sender has to say. And so therefore, it's just more of the invalidation. It's more of the, well, you're overreacting. You shouldn't have said this. You shouldn't have said that. Mm-hmm. But it's when I bring the energy that you brought back to you.
Exactly.
That's what it is. I don't know, at times I can definitely say there have been times where I'll tone it down, or I'll approach in a polite way. I will engage with someone and really take them to the side and say, hey, this needs to go a different way.
Yes.
But sometimes you catch what you catch, and and I'm not trying to be mean.
No, and I think that's the thing, and that's when we talk about learning how to challenge it. So the micro challenge, how to challenge, and I think that's what many people that were able to attend that session that morning talked about. Well, my personality, I'm very direct. Someone else said, well, I'm not as direct, and I don't like conflict, so it's not as easy for me. But we have to learn how to really speak up and get out of the comfort zone. So I do agree. I think for some people, it will be much easier, because like, no, I'm not here for any of this. Whereas, I'm kind of, it depends on when you catch me, because that's where my sister joked me, like, don't let the smile fool you. When you really hit me, I will come, and that's it. And it's sort of like the Hulk smash. I'm done,
Yeah, and it depends on the type of thing also, how triggering it is when these things happen. But I think in our profession, there's just a lot of this, and I've seen it,
It is.
from in my grad school 1.0, as I call it. I experienced where a professor told me that my name was spelled incorrectly. She wasn't going to pronounce it the way that I said it was pronounced. She
Right.
decided, no, it's spelled incorrectly. Well, like, how do you figure that
Right.
that my parents spelled my name wrong?
Right. Right.
Like, how do you have the authority to state this
Exactly.
and then to continue calling it incorrectly on
Right.
purpose to make a point?
Right.
It's that sort of thing
Yeah.
is also, that's
an
happening in our
assault.
programs.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's happening in our programs, but then we're saying, well, we want to diversify and we want to make our programs more, inclusive of other groups, et cetera, and have more representation from other groups. So how can you do that if your programs are structured in such a way that these things go unchecked and are permitted and are even celebrated at times?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is, I think, one of the questions that you had, I think mentioned before, was like, right, how does this impact our program? And it does. And when you think about relationships between faculty and students, between clinicians and supervisors, absolutely. And you're right, we have these programs where we attempt to recruit. We'll have grants, we have scholarships, all this stuff for accreditation. We have this, diversity here, but we are not looking at what is happening to make sure that our students are excelling, that they feel welcome, that they even like the profession or feel that they can actually become a great speech language pathologist and or audiologist. Because to your point, someone's telling you that your name is spelled incorrectly, or they're creating rubrics that for exit exams or some type of simulation where you must have this command of grammar and it must be this way exactly. And if you happen to present some dialectal feature, we're marking you off, those things. And so there have been students telling me how supervisors have told them the way you speak, you might want to consider something else. So you're going to have to work on that if you're going to go out and get a job in a hospital setting or this setting. And
meanwhile, we're treating people who speak the way that
it was exactly.
So,
right.
But we can erase all that,
right,
and pretend that didn't exist.
Exactly.
Yeah, I also got it in grad school 2.0. I had it in an experience where I did a presentation, and afterwards, the two white professors were like, "This one gets it," and I was kind of like, like this one, what, ma'am? Like, how did this?
Yes.
What are we talking about here?
Right.
And what exactly
You're
did
the
she
good
get?
One. Yeah.
And so now I get to be the token one, or
yes.
What is it exactly that I'm quote unquote getting?
Yes.
And so it's stuff like that just really makes you step back and think, okay, this is some bull. But again, how do we engage? And so I think that those things, when they're happening in CSD programs in particular, we are limiting that diversity that we're claiming we're actually seeking. So you mentioned already African American English, a little bit of dialectal difference and all of that. When did you realize that your culture or the way you communicate was not quote unquote mainstream?
Actually in grad school, and it was my department chair, Black audiologist. I walked into the office and I needed to ask a question, but I said, ask. I kept saying, I said, is Dr. So-and-so in? And I need to ask him a question. And he happened to come out, and all of a sudden, like, the secretary was like, oh. And he was like, you need to do what? You need to do what? Yeah. And I was like, I need to ask a question. What? And he just like he couldn't hear. And I mean, I'm literally oblivious. I'm sort of like, what is going on? And then he's like, oh, so you want to chop me? And I was like, what? He said, or do you want to ask? So I was like, yes, I need to ask a question. Oh my gosh. And I think at that moment, and with Kiki laughing again, whatever, but here I am, little student, but I just never get going back to, making it back to my dorm. And it's like, I just felt so defeated that day. Like, what was that? Because for me, coming from my little hometown of Oxford, we were always deemed as articulate little girls, smart girls, whatever, and, hard workers, good students. So I'm just kind of like, I was made to feel like I was incompetent or just something was wrong with me, right? And so at that point, I was like, oh, okay, I totally speak different. And then even in my doc program, that was something that I felt I was always being dinged on. I mean, there were rubrics that we were given after we presented in class, and it was watch your this. And watch your that. It could be I can understand like ums and fillers, because I do have to watch that. I do know that's something that I do, but be careful of your ings and this and that. And you're just kind of like, really?
That's what you got out of my presentation?
All right. Out of all of that. Okay. And I always tell my students, so now when I'm having to present, it's really trying to practice that script. Or if I'm presenting with someone, they could tell you it's like, Karen's in the room the night before going nowhere, practicing, where they're out and about relaxing. I'm like, because no one's going to ding me on me saying something incorrectly or pronouncing a word wrong. Because it seems like I can hear anybody else do it, but for some reason, Karen Davis does it. Someone feels the need to bring to my attention, or I just did the ultimate sin. So I'm just so aware of it now.
Yeah, but that's so much extra work, though, and so much of a burden to do all of this extra stuff that we do to avoid the potential episode of whatever thing has happened. And so I think that's one of the things that we have to remember is that when these microaggressions occur, you carry that with you. It doesn't just happen on, it was Tuesday and it happened and I'm done. Now it's a whole nother day. No, it's still with you at times. There are certain ones that you carry with you from then on and that are very challenging to overcome because it was such a hurtful or the place you were in at the time. You were vulnerable and it hit you, right?
Absolutely.
So that is one way that I think something such as your title, you're a doctor, right? You have a PhD, but that type of thing can be chipped away at because of this position. And I'm saying that because that's my experience as well. I've walked into spaces and felt like, well, maybe I don't measure up because so-and-so said, or I had this experience, or in this grad school program, they did that. And so that's where they become extremely harmful.
Absolutely.
Now, what about when you're navigating different systems on your own, like just out in life and you experience those microaggressions? How do you handle that?
I feel like that I am much more vocal and like you said, really handle, I challenge right then and there. And it may be because I don't know who this person is. I don't have any connection, but it's just like, okay, no, that wasn't appropriate. No, that's not okay. Or I'm really going back and forth and like, really indicating or highlighting that was inappropriate. Let me tell you why. But I will say, I think, of course, when I was living in Atlanta, other places like that, I feel like I experienced it or I guess recognize it as much as I do when I'm in the workforce or when I'm in academia or just, again, in my field as a clinician working with clients where this really becomes more prevalent. But yes, for my day to day, I find that I address it and, I'm talking about the topic more. I think just, with family friends about it, having these real discussions, even with, my white friends, Asian friends, what have you, really having those real conversations because we're just kind of not in a formal setting at this point. But I am more adamant about how I challenge when it does occur.
Even for me, particularly with my children, when it happens, it becomes extremely problematic for me. Recently, my son wanted to purchase a yearbook. He hadn't ordered one, so we recognized he might not get one. He went, he asked about it. They said it was going to be $75. Not a problem, but I preferred not to send my child to school with $80 in his pocket to purchase a yearbook.
Right.
So I asked him to ask, would it be okay to just write a check, send a check to the school? And the lady, for whatever reason, said, no, she can't take checks because they might bounce, and it was like, well, hold on a second here, like what exactly is that supposed to mean? I know what you're trying to say, but do you know what you're saying? Do you recognize this? And so what I did is I ended up calling the school and talking to them and saying, this is not actually a district policy. So why in this situation, is this the response? And at that time I got the invalidation, the person who called me back was like, well, what she may have meant to say. And I was like, I'm going to stop you right there and help you out. You know what she meant to say. I know what she meant to say. And you know why she felt it was okay to say that. And that's really where we are. We're not at, maybe you can explain this away because there's no context in which that would be an appropriate response. Especially when this is not a policy. And if it were a policy, the answer would be, we don't accept checks. Not implying that a person doesn't have the means to write a check, So it's things like that. When it happens with them, I struggle a little bit more with just being like, well, dismissing it or not letting it bother me, so to speak. When it happens with me, it could go either way at times. I tend to respond, but I could also live with that person's ignorant and I'm moving on today.
Well, because I think we talked last time, even now, like right now, you're aware that I'm geared to have an upcoming surgery, but I was telling you before about the process where I was going through various surgeons. It was the issue where one surgeon, and I hope it's not TMI, but it's more so where, I'm dealing with fibroids. And so I'm over 40 and they send me to a fertility center for the specialist, basically. And I'm not there to talk about having kids. It's like, can you remove these fibroids, please, and do this particular procedure? But the conversation, as I shared, it was the way I was talked at. It was, why don't you just go ahead and remove everything? I mean, you're too old. What's the point? Just be done with this. So very insensitive, or the assumption was made that I already had kids. And it's like, well, you see, on the case history form, I indicated that I have none. And it was just, all these assumptions. And then it was just these comments made about my insurance. And you're just like, what is happening here? That was one of those instances where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I read about when they talk about women of color and their healthcare, and just how horrible this particular specialist was to me. And now the one that I'm with, absolutely amazing, very sensitive, listen, but it was really interesting, just the assumptions that were being made about me. And I think even the nurse, when she first met me, which is kind of like, they're dismissive. But then when she asked, just happened to ask where I worked or what I did for a living. Oh, you're a professor.
Yeah, now.
Okay.
Now we had to change gears.
You're not like the other, right? Like you said, you're not them. But then I get to the specialist and she's like, I don't care what you are. You just whatever. Now we're going to deal with your age and, let me attack you there. And it was really an experience. Yes.
Struggle with it now. When I lived in Maryland, we had Johns Hopkins care.
Yes.
Different than what I'm seeing here in Texas. It was very different. And I'm questioning, why did we move? But but I have not secured effective care here because of that. And that is extremely problematic, coming from a place where I felt that I had very strong care. To a space where I'm like, none of these people care about how I'm doing, if I'm, surviving, doing well. And I mentioned before when we talked that, I had ended up in the ER. I had some pain and I went to the ER to get it addressed because I didn't have a primary care that I trusted. And I also could not go immediately to see the person.
Right.
And the questions and the comments and the things that were said in that space, I was just like, is this even happening? Assumptions about my healthcare, well, you probably don't have healthcare. So if you end up needing an MRI, here's how you can get one that's affordable. Like, did you have a question for me, or did you just want to tell me about my life? And then, oh, well, if you have healthcare, you probably have a high deductible. Well, like, don't I get to pick how my deductible?
Right.
like didn't I plan for that?
Exactly.
And kind of do that based on my situation. So couldn't I still use my insurance in that case? But how do you just assume?
Right.
And then go there. And not only that, I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth, and we live in between the two major cities. And so then it was, well, how did you get here today? Because the place you need to go is in Fort Worth. Well, like, how did you get here today, sir?
Right.
I'm not making assumptions about how you got to work. So
exactly. Right. Right.
But it's those sorts of things that keep happening that makes it hard. And then it just gets compounded. So my son earlier this year had a surgery, and even taking him to an ER, having to have him transported in an ambulance because of COVID, we couldn't ride with him.
Right.
Like, just imagine how hard or how much more stressful that is when you already don't trust the healthcare system.
Right.
But now you got to let your child go.
Right.
By himself and hope this works out,
Right.
And we're following, of course.
Right.
Yeah, we're following. But I'm like, but how many microaggressions? How many comments? How many inappropriate things are happening?
Yes.
And I'm not there to help or to oversee this. So I don't think people recognize the additional stress that is added to us navigating spaces and us living our fullest lives.
Right.
When we're forced to deal with microaggressions everywhere and different racist or phobias, as you mentioned, and different isms and phobias.
Right.
In whatever spaces. So it's challenging. And it doesn't matter if it's not your specific group, because once it comes into play, this person has some, we got a bigot. Then it's like, I'm not like, oh, he just doesn't like that other group. This is a problem.
Exactly. Yes.
But that's a challenge. How do you teach your students or incorporate this kind of content into your program?
Well, right now where I am, I do have multicultural course that I teach. So that's one of the topics for sure that we discuss. But even before that, that was something that I know I was talking about on my classes, and I kept trying to encourage my faculty members to do the same and also in clinic. We have to have this conversation with our clinical supervisors. And also I definitely tried to work hard, speaking up, or I even conducted like many workshops for my staff, like say, okay, this is happening. This is how we can address this. And this is something I can't do on my own. I need you to take ownership and interest and really be vigilant about this. And when I'm given all the examples, I'm not trying to downplay the context of race, but showing them, okay, you see how this is happening here. We've got to be aware of our biases. So therefore, how it may translate in how we interact with our clients, how we interact with our peers. And if we are experiencing this, we need to speak up about it. And so I know when I talk to my students, like even my students at one point would come to me because, I am the only Black faculty in my program. And so there have been instances where students will come and say, well, this student said this, and, was that racist? Was that sexist? And I said, okay, let's talk. How should you respond? I need you to go back and do this because it's this want me to come in and regulate or whatever. I said, well, I wasn't there. So this is how we're going to have to handle this. But I think that, of course, what we have discussed when I think about ASHA, we talk about having courses that are required in graduate programs, like, your multicultural course being required and not an elective, or, it's the option of where individuals incorporate the topic of multicultural issues in all your courses. But the thing that we have to understand is that I got to make sure whoever is teaching that class, what is their understanding and knowledge of it? Because they'll just talk about bilingualism and say, okay, well, I did multicultural issues and speech sound disorders, and that's it. Yeah. or deaf, hard of hearing and speech science.
We're finished.
Right.
Check the box.
That's right. It. And we're done. We're done. And really understanding what we mean by that. So I think really trying to create a way or tools to help professors to really think about when they are developing their courses, how do I make this culturally responsive and relevant? What does that mean? Not necessarily saying I'm going to talk about all these populations and highlight what we think their beliefs and behaviors are, not that.
In one really, class meeting.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's something that I try to do. I just know that when I was given the multicultural class, it was this week we have the Hispanic population. This week we have African Americans. I switched all of that. So now we're going to talk about systemic racism. We're going to talk about how it's impacted our field, what it means, really more so reflecting on your experience and biases and how this translates and how you engage with people that are from different walks of life.
Yeah. And that's really where it needs to start with the person.
Yes.
So I need to examine my own biases. I need to examine where I am and what things I could do differently. And then I'm able to look at situations, cases, scenarios, all that in a different light.
Exactly.
Rather than me saying, here's what you should do when you meet an Asian person. Like,
right.
Even in these categories that we're given, Asian, how diverse is this group?
Right. Exactly.
So I'm just going to give you, here's the formula for talking to, that doesn't even make sense. But a lot of the programs are structured in that way that, if you're dealing with this. And a lot of times the questions that come from our students even are seeking that type of information. My students will ask a question like, well, what should I say to a person who, wait a minute, let's back up and figure out how do we engage with a person who maybe has different views or different values or different perspectives on life than you do.
Exactly.
That's more the issue. So I'm with you. I don't get into like, here's what you say to this population or do with this population.
Right. And
I can't teach you all of them
out there like that. So I think it's where somebody picked it up and then just try to outline that course based on the way that book has been organized.
Yeah. And don't get me started on that. Had to do a petition on the book not too long ago. So we're not going to go there, but that's huge right there, just because there's no way for any course to cover all of the types of people that you will meet in life.
Right.
I can't even cover all the people you're going to meet in a week.
Yes. So. And it's so interesting because, and it's, I think there was, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but like, do professors experience microaggressions from students and so forth? But I found it interesting before summer started and students were registering for classes. I can't tell you how many emails I had gotten from students or people students stop in my office said, so Dr. Davis, I'm thinking about taking multicultural. So so tell me more about, what is your class about? Tell me more about it. What else? So what, and they're not asking about, the workload. They're not asking me, are there papers I'm writing, will there be certain exams? And it was more so like, so what is it about?
How
and
uncomfortable am I about to be?
Yes. I said,
and I
said, well, let me ask you this. Did you ask Dr. So-and-so about her pop culture class? Did you pose this question to her? And they give me this look like, And I said, you're afraid, aren't you? I said, well, yeah, we're going to talk about some issues that are not comfortable. So yes. Yeah. I said, but I think if you look at the course catalog and what's on our website, it's very clear what my class is about. Very evident. But out of all the professors, I have to explain to them. I've got to make them comfortable.
Do. Exactly. Because they're trying to put their toe in the water to see, is this safe over here?
Yes.
No, we're going to talk about stuff and it's going to be uncomfortable. And I got it, even in the feedback that we get. I think there are plenty of microaggressions in that as well when you get student feedback. But mine was that I started the class with them exploring implicit biases. And whomever this was felt that was divisive. And I'm like, okay, well, welcome to the class. And this next week we're talking about,
yes.
Because I don't remember running it by you.
Right.
I was going to go ahead and do professor part and you do
Exactly.
So, but I think that even that, I don't like the way that you're presenting this, or I don't like the way that you're talking about this topic, or I was uncomfortable. And at times even it turned into, if you don't agree with, what I'm saying, then therefore it's wrong. And I'm like, no, if what you're saying is racist or homophobic or something to that effect, then that's a problem. That's
exactly. And there are times I even call students out. I'm like, don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Because then they try to give you those cliches. That's a look. I said, no, ma'am. Yeah. I need deeper thought than this. No.
Exactly. So there's definitely microaggressions that go both ways, and that particularly for faculty of color, which was part of what we presented on together with Dr. Yolanda Holt. So final question, do you have any advice or final thoughts for our audience regarding microaggressions as they relate to our topic, our cultural linguistic diversity?
Well, I think honestly, our next step really is to figure out, going beyond DEI. I was reading an article recently and I wrote it down. Oh my goodness. I think I might just have it here. I got all these papers by Ellis and Kendall that was in the AGSLP. They talked about really going beyond just diversity, equity, inclusion. I think we really are getting a handle, but I think now we really, really have to be a bit more vigilant about what to do when we do these studies. And we're asking students, we're asking colleagues about the experience, but now what do they need or what do they think? Really trying to create strategies and some type of programming that we can implement and try and start training to at least increase the comfort level to challenge, like you're saying, really training and getting a hold of those that are committing the microaggression. So as we stated, students are in a position, even me as a junior faculty, I'm associate, but I'm trying to get this tenure. So it's a unique situation, but dealing with my program director or department chair, and for them having functioned above us along, we really need to get them to understand how to respond when someone expresses that you just microaggressed me, you committed a microaggression, and how can we talk about this? So I think now our next step is really, really trying to figure out what are the responses? How do we do this? How can we measure this? Or how can we, if we are going to do particular training or talk about this, how can we make this high quality professional development in which is ongoing and not this one shot thing where, like you said, checklists. And that's
the one and done. And
the one and done. And so that's the thing. And I know it's not easy. It's not. There are days where you just don't feel like being bothered with this. You just kind of want to go through your day, but just, in the position that I'm in this part of my career. And I think for many of us and for these upcoming SLPs and audiologists, we have to address this and figure out a way to dismantle these microaggressions, because if we're going to diversify this field, first recruit, we got to keep our students and we can't keep
and the faculty.
And the faculty. Exactly. It's just, we're going to be at a loss here. And so I think that's something that we really got to start thinking hard about. It's one thing to get grants and provide scholarships, but once we get those students there or faculty there, we really got to figure out what are the effective tools that can help them combat microaggressions, and how can we effectively educate those individuals that are in the position, and like with microaggressions, they often do not know that they're doing it, educate them, and we can work on some way, somehow, really trying to dismantle this individually and systemically.
Yeah, we got to get past, like you said, past the DEI level.
Yeah, because everybody's getting certificates now.
stuff.
Like, I went to DI training. Here you
Yeah,
go.
you're
Let me
like-
put on my CV. But what are we doing with it?
Yeah, not
You
sure.
What are we doing with it? I'm not even
So,
sure
yeah.
what happens. I actually had logged on a couple times. Well, let me jump on this. And it's like, okay, so what would this look like exactly? My program. Who do I connect with? You know, and I think if there's any diversity centers or resources on campuses, or whether in the workplace, we got to collaborate and find a way to work together and put together a real feasible action plan.
Let me just toss that shameless plug out there. Our sponsor, React Initiative, Inc.
Yes.
We do that type of training. We do support, organizations, individuals, et cetera, through this type of training, and not simply the check the box friendly kind.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but look, I'm telling you, I was actually working on a grant, and I was plugging you in there. I was telling my program director about it. I said, I have a wonderful expert that I think I need to bring here that can help us.
We can have some fun and get some actual work done too. So
yes,
all good. But I thank you once again for your patience for doing this again when the sound was not tight, and hopefully the sound is better. But thank you so much again for being a guest. I'm just honored that you would be here, and I appreciate you, and definitely loved your support when we were at Impossible. So thank you.
And we had so much fun. I was like, oh my God, this is great.
It was a good time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to The Culture We Speak. Special thanks to our guest, Dr. Karen Davis, to Taja Sparkman for the original lyrics to our theme music, and to our sponsor, React Initiative, Inc. In the next episode, I discuss social justice with Ms. Simone Rustkamp of Healing Justice, Santa Barbara. Visit theculturewespeak.com and subscribe for updates. Join our Facebook group for additional resources and content.